I really appreciate your participation with the Build Out live stream every Wednesday at noon Eastern Daylight Time, exclusively here on LinkedIn. The stream will be starting in just 1 minute. In the meantime, let me take this opportunity to talk to you about the live streaming studio that I use to stream Build Out with Jim Kunkle. StreamYard is a live streaming browser-based studio that allows you to interview guests, share your screen, and much more. With StreamYard, you can multi-stream directly to your website, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and for those who qualify, live stream here on LinkedIn. So now's the time to start live streaming. In the event post and on the video description is a referral link for a $10 credit when you become a paid subscriber to StreamYard. Today on Build Out, my guest is CaLae McDermott from CEM Marketing and Events. CaLae and I will have a conversation on the topic of corporate and industry events. Okay, let's get the conversation started. Hey, CaLae, welcome to the live stream.
Hey, Jim. Thanks for having me.
It's so great to have you here today. Hey, before we would start our conversation on corporate and industry events, could you do me a favor, and the viewers too? Could you do a professional background on yourself, and also if you could provide some information on CEM Marketing and Events?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm an association girl by trade. I grew up at NACE International. I spent 11 years there. And then I moved over to the American Welding Society. And I spent a couple of years there as their director of conferences and events. And the inspiration for CEM came from my interactions with the membership on both the NACE side and the AWS side. I was lucky enough to work side by side with some of the most influential people in the corrosion, coatings, and welding industry. And basically, I just wanted to create events that were extremely non-traditional, like this boxing event that we're going to talk about later, that made them incredibly proud. If you hear a lot of their backgrounds, most of them came from absolutely nothing, saw a need in the industry, and built million-dollar organizations out of that need. And so I just get inspired every single day. And so that's what made me want to create events that make them proud to come to them.
Yeah, and my experience with you, obviously, with NACE International and the corrosion conferences that you'd done, and you did an amazing and outstanding job with that. And I can imagine, the same thing with American Welding Society. What I find so amazing is where CEM and where you are at right now. Mm-hmm. As we're rolling out of this pandemic, mm-hmm. we're seeing industry trends, and I'm going to cover during a video kind of preview on a topic that I'm going to post a link to. It's interesting to see where the events industry is really poised to go. Mm-hmm. It's not going to disappear or suffer too long. Mm-hmm. It's just amazing to see where things are going to go. And I know some of the things that we're going to talk about are very interesting and exciting. And mm-hmm. I encourage people to follow CEM Marketing, follow you on LinkedIn. A lot of people, hopefully, that will be commenting today and asking questions are people who are participating in your events. So I'm really looking forward to our discussion today.
Thank you. Me too.
So for the viewers, this is going to be what we're going to be covering today. We're going to talk about corporate events. We're going to cover a little bit more in depth about Go Beyond the Happy Hour. And then I'm going to have a thing talking about what's really next for live events. And then we have some tips regarding making a corporate event a success. So when we talk about really industry and corporate events, mm-hmm. as a professional, how do you define what a corporate and an industry event is?
So to me, a corporate event is something that you as your corporation is putting on and you're hosting your clients or potential clients. An industry event is basically fair game to everyone in the industry. So CEM does a little bit of both. Obviously, we create events that we know the industry would like to go to, like these happy hours, boxing events, things like that. On the flip side of that, we also get hired to do team building events, corporate receptions at larger trade shows like FabTech, for example, private parties, things like that.
So most conference goers are used to attending opening receptions and other type of social activities and networking activities. You and I, before the stream launch, we were talking about some of the things that are done, for example, during World of Concrete, and also too during the Workboat International. And there's many other conferences like FabTech and everything, a lot of other industry conferences. You will work with a client, and it could be anything from a branding awareness, maybe an appreciation for customers. What goes into the planning of those special events?
So basically, you want to find out exactly what the client is looking for that week. Sometimes, like we recently did an event for a company during the show FabTech, and they didn't want to have a booth this year with everybody downsizing the way that they were. They were unsure about the amount of turnout on the trade show floor, but they still wanted to make an impact. And so we decided to create a private event. And what we did was we had their business development people with custom invitations going out the Sunday, Monday, and the Tuesday before the event, passing out those invitations to anyone they think could be an industry partner, could be a potential customer, or a current customer. And so we planned the event around the schedule of the conference to make sure we didn't conflict with anything, because again, you're there to maximize the show. So if there is one of those opening receptions or something like that, you don't want to conflict with that in any way, shape, or form. And we want to make it easy on the attendee too that's coming. So you don't want to have it far away from the convention center or anything like that. So we're very thoughtful in how we create them, where we create them, the timing of it, to make sure that, hey, if you've got dinner planned with one of your customers and you had it planned for 6 weeks ago, they already got a hold of you and made that confirmation. Well, why don't you just stop by for a quick drink on your way to dinner? And so that's how we did that, so that you weren't conflicting with anyone's dinner plans, you weren't conflicting with anything on the trade show floor, and you're going to want to drink after a long day of walking that floor anyway, right? So just come by our reception and have a quick drink and meet and mingle, and then head out to your dinner. And so that's how we organize that.
And you typically build off the energy of the conference, the theme of the conference, when you do design them?
Yeah, absolutely. And then we also make sure that I'm a big branding person. So if I'll show you some pictures, but everything that stood still had their logo on it. So I pick places that have the huge screens that we can take over, lots of opportunities for banners, all that kind of stuff, because that's the whole point of it, right? We also had looping videos showing the demo of their products. We also had giveaways that was branded with their logos, so they walked out with something, so that when they're going to dinner and they're setting that branded piece on the table next to them, that's being seen by everyone at the restaurant. So that brand recognition goes far beyond just that reception. Yeah,
and earlier, again, in the pre-stream, we were talking about where, I was at a Workboat International in New Orleans, and an event held at the Bourbon Cowboy, and to see people the next day walking around with the swag that was given out, because it was special swag that was given out at that private, invitation-only event. And the cool thing about it was one of these ones where you did not feel the pitch, you did not realize the pitch, but you fell into it in a good way. And then the next day, hearing the buzz and people talking about it. So there's a lot of value. In fact, when you look at a lot of the companies' marketing budgets, they're really kind of geared to taking advantage of corporate and industry events, and especially focusing around some of the conferences. Based on my research, where things are kind of moving into the future, the events industry is going to do very well. It's going to be blended, obviously, with technology, live streaming, also doing online as well, and then obviously face-to-face, and then these special events like what you plan. How do you feel related to the embracing of technologies? How do you feel about that?
I mean, I think that there's no getting away from it. That's the way the future is going to be. I'm an in-person person, right? And I also come from a very, my events are for skilled trade, right? And so there's a lot that they're just not going to sit in front of a computer for an hour or 2 hours a day during a virtual event. As creative as we try to make it, it's just one of those hurdles that's extremely hard to get over when you're trying to get a CP technician to come in off the field and sit in front of a computer. It's just hard. When you're trying to get to a welder in person, much less when he's on an outage, right? It's extremely hard to get his attention. So I'm all in favor of in-person events. However, hybrid seems to be the way that we're going. And so my job is to create the virtual side of that hybrid event as interactive and as in person as I can possibly make it. And so, and not only for the attendee side, but for my sponsors and exhibitors, right? I want to let them know and make them feel like they're having the same interaction with that person virtually as they are the person that's walking into their booth.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too with hybrid, and I just posted, a comment from Heidi Brooks from VCP Sales. Like Heidi says, like you say, it definitely blended. The other thing too is it now opens up the opportunity for a lot of the international attendees who are not, let's say they're not able to for whatever reason. It could be financial, it could be travel restrictions, it could be just company related issues. If they're not able to physically go to the conference, now they have an opportunity to participate. But they can also too, with technology, participate in these specialized events that you're doing when it comes to corporate and industry events as well.
And I'll even say for some of our happy hours, we had some of our sponsors that weren't comfortable traveling. And so this is going to sound pretty cheesy, but what we did is we set them up on Facebook Live and set them at the bar. And so when people were going to get their drinks, they were talking to a sponsor that was, bellied up to the bar. And it was great. The sponsor loved it. And so we try to get as creative as possible during this time.
Yeah, very good. Very good. I agree. Definitely, Heidi. Paula James from Carboline asked the question of, what kinds of giveaways or swags do you see the best responses from?
So I will tell you, at this recent event we did at FabTech, one of the best giveaways was this, and I hope this doesn't offend anyone, was this flask. And it was a leather flask, and their logo was as big as you could get it on there. And it was a huge hit. The other thing I'll say, and again, going back to, I got to know my audience, right? I'm corrosion, coatings, and welding. Those are my people. And hats. Cool hats, the Richardson 112 hats with a very cool logo on the side. Those guys wear it all the time. And so little things like that you could give away. Koozies are also a big hit for our happy hours. Any kind of literature is really hard to give away, I'll say that. So you want something that, a flask, I'll say they can take with them on golf tournaments, all fishing tournaments, everything. So a flask and hats, I think, are good buy for your money.
That sounds pretty good. Pretty good. And Natasha has said her, Facebook Live works great. It does, especially with an international, but it seems like anymore everyone's obviously still on Facebook. So it's definitely a big player. Here's a post from Alini. Hybrid is a good option, offering opportunities, increase engagement across the board. You can put whatever you want into the flask. That's true.
Exactly.
So don't be offended by a flask. The other thing too is the incorporation of, like you said, with literature and everything, QR codes and things like that. I'm sure you incorporate a lot of that too in your events and things like that. How hard? Let's put it this way: if someone out there saying, "Listen, my company, I kind of run my own events and do things. And in a past life for me, I work for a national roofing company. And I remember the owner of the company came to me and say, you're going to run a hosted buyer down in Naples, Florida. And the last person who ran it, they're no longer here, but they were not there because they did a bad conference or a bad event. I didn't know anything about it. And I had to try to quickly learn about it. Now, we had a great customer hosted buyer thing. But let me tell you a crazy story with it. When I ran it myself, there was one area I did not check properly with the resort we had it at, was the quality of their AV equipment. And I was scrambling on a Sunday morning to try to get audio-visual equipment that would work well. And I got lucky. And we got back to here in Pittsburgh, and we did a debrief of all the results from it. I later after, we all said, hey, great success. Customers were happy. Later, I went to the owner and I said, Gary, I did not tell you this, but the AV equipment was not up to snuff at the resort. And I had to go out and make alternative arrangements. And he said to me, the event worked out great. You handled it. But if you would have told me what you just told me down in Naples, I would have fired you on the spot for not being better prepared. So long story short, what I'm trying to get to is there are going to be people that say, listen, I can do this. I can do a happy hour at a bar.
Yeah.
And maybe they can, maybe you can't, but there's so much that goes into this. Can you talk a little bit about the complexities of setting some of these things up?
Yeah, it's funny. We started these industry happy hours back in July of 2020. And it basically just came from people wanting to get together. And that's what I do, right? So I just organized a happy hour. And from there, it's gone to, we are all over Texas. We're in Louisiana. We did our first one in North Carolina last month. And so it's just growing like gangbusters. And it's funny because there's a happy hour on every single day of the week, especially here in Houston. And everyone from the outside looks at it and think it's no big deal. You just, pick a space at a bar and invite people, and that's about it. But for me, I feel like you have to be very thoughtful with, number one, the locations that you're picking. You want to find out exactly who your target audience is. Yeah. And then you want to really, make sure that, you're not just letting people come into a bar, that you're standing there greeting them and you're thanking them for coming, because most of the time, especially here in Houston, they've probably driven for 45 minutes to get to your event, right? So you want to be really, considerate of them coming into the room and thank them for coming. And then you also want to make sure that you're paying attention to what kind of liquor they're really enjoying, so that you can make sure that when you move to another location or when you come back next month, that they have that on hand. You want to float the room and make sure everybody's having a good time. You want to look for the people that are standing on the outskirts that don't really know anyone and bring them into the fold and make sure that they're being introduced. If you have sponsors, you want to find out exactly who your sponsors want to meet that night and make sure that you're connecting them. And if there's not that audience that they're looking for, you want to make sure that you have a meeting with them afterwards to find out how you can rectify that situation. Because, for instance, I have one of my happy hours now that it's a struggle, right? I look across the room, and for the past, 2 or 3 months, it's been a lot of business development people, but not a lot of end users. That's a problem for me. So we're changing our marketing. We're figuring out what we can do, because I have a really hard time trying to sell my sponsor when he knows that he is providing drinks for business development people, right? So all of that goes in my opinion, to a happy hour. I will say something that a lot of people don't really pay attention to is the day after. Thank yous always are the day after. Thank yous to your sponsors. Thank you to the people that are attending. Calendar invites for the next month. All of that goes into a 2.5 hour happy hour.
Sam asked the question, he's obviously attended your events, and he definitely enjoys them. What do you think separates your events from others?
Our goal is to connect people. That's our goal. Our goal is when Sam walks in, find out who Sam is looking for that night. And if I can comb that registration list and find out who's there from the companies or the job title, make sure that he's getting that introduction that evening. Or if I can do it the next day or something like that, if he calls me and says, hey, I met someone, I wasn't able to get their business card, this is their first name, can you help me figure it out? I always try to do that for them. Our goal is to connect people. Yes, we want you to have fun, have a great time, but the end result is for you to catch up with some of your old friends, meet some new friends, and in 3 to 6 months get a PO. That's the goal of these events.
Yeah, and Natasha talks about really maximizing your brand, and the events are a way to go. The other thing too, what I find interesting about some of the events, not only thinking of it for branding, market awareness and things like that, but also it's an opportunity for companies and organizations to help in recruiting.
Yeah.
And currently we're kind of in a crunch where we have a lot of people who've retired, a lot of people that are out of the workforce. You've got companies struggling to find workforce. Do you do events like that too?
We haven't yet. When I was at the American Welding Society, we did a career fair, and it was a huge hit. In fact, it was one of the most moving times of my life, because I took a chance on that. It was our first conference in Houston, and I said, I would see all these billboards of people looking for welders when I would drive all over Houston. Yeah. And so I just said, let's do a career fair and let's just see how it goes. I had no idea how many companies would want to take part in it, and nonetheless, how many welders would. And so it was unbelievable. We had about 20 companies there. And honestly, Jim, the line was out the door. It was such a great event. And so there's definitely room in the market for that, especially right now.
Yeah, definitely. A little different spin on doing a traditional type of career fair. So let's go ahead and let's go beyond happy hour and talk about happy hour events. That is something you very much specialize in. That is something that, Sam has participated and he talked about in his comment there. Can you cover what are your happy hour events?
Yeah, so they're called industry happy hour events. They're basically, we specialize in corrosion, coatings, and welding. And what we're trying to do is connect people, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean that you want to connect someone from a contractor point of view to someone from, that's high up in the plant. That's not what we're trying to say, because a lot of people I have a lot of potential sponsors that will walk into the room and they'll stand there and I'll watch them and they won't really mingle with anyone because, well, there's no one in NFRs. There's no one with, for example, a Lyondell-Basell, name badge on. But they're not going beyond that to see actually somebody that, another contractor could actually help you. There's a piece of the business that they don't do that could help you get into a certain job they're working on. They could subcontract it out. There's so many possibilities. But the end result, that's what I want to hear, is that people are getting jobs. They're meeting critical people that they've been wanting to meet. I remember in the early days, I walked into the ladies' room and there was this woman jumping up and down. And I was like, what's going on? Are you okay? And she goes, I have been trying to meet this guy for the past year, CaLae. And he isn't allowed to go to lunch, nothing like that. But he came to this, had a drink, and we're having a meeting next week. And I was like, that's what I want. That's why I created this. And so that's our goal with each and every happy hour.
Interesting. That's so great. And also too, on LinkedIn under CEM marketing and events, and even under your professional profile on LinkedIn, you can see a lot of the photographs, and then also sometimes there's video clips and things like that you do put up there, so people get a better understanding of these happy hours. And I'll be honest, everyone I talk with, Sam especially, and some of my really great friends in the Houston area, really just rave about them. So it's just amazing.
Thank you.
And Rebecca says, excellent resource for networking.
Oh, thanks.
Definitely agree with that. Related to the happy hour events, so you're talking about having these at bars and other type of social places. When it comes to things such as, this is going to be a little bit more related to the liability. A lot of organizations and companies are afraid of liability. What safeguards do you have in place, or do you offer or recommend companies to have when they do these events? So,
we would, we don't any longer, but we did take temperatures at the door and things like that. And then we were notified that someone had recently contracted COVID, we would make sure that we would send an email out accordingly. We also have quite a few people that will tell us we're not technically allowed to be here, so don't take pictures of us. And so we try to be very respectful of that and appreciative that they took the chance to come out. But honestly, there's so many companies with so many different policies right now on travel, non-travel, even, taking lunches, having people come in for lunch and learns, things like that. You really have to follow, in my opinion, your heart on something like this and what you're comfortable with. There's some people that are just now coming out that haven't been out since we started doing these because they're just now comfortable with it, with the vaccinations and everything like that. And so, and I have some of my long-term, NACE members that I've known, for 15 years now, and they just simply aren't comfortable yet, but they cheer me on from the side and want to hear all about it. And I just think it really is dependent on what your company policy is and what you're comfortable with.
And then the other thing too, when it comes to the guests, the people that are attending the event, there is some measures in place to make sure that they're not having too much happy hour.
Oh, for sure.
And then for liability when it comes to insurances and things like that. So there are ways, obviously, to address a lot of those issues. And to your point, good.
well, we do a lot of checks and balances with the bartenders, with the management to make sure that no one's being overserved. If on the off chance that it is, we make sure that an Uber's called and things like that. We have had a couple of incidents where I'll get a text the next morning that they left our place and went somewhere else and they're just checking on a friend. And so we absolutely have that ability with our registration system to call them and email them or text them and say, hey, did you make it home okay? I heard you went out, after our event, stuff like that. So as big as these events are, I always like to keep that family atmosphere where we check on each other. And so, that's very much in place for us.
That's great to hear. That's really great to hear. So let's talk about fight nights.
Okay. Yeah. This is going to sound weird, but I have always wanted to do a really contentious debate in a boxing ring. And so I have the ability to do that now. So we are doing a debate on automation versus manual, which is a welding topic. And we're doing it at Termite Watkins Gym. It's called Fighter Nation. And Termite, obviously, previous boxer, huge in business development here in the Houston area. So everyone knows Termite. And so his gym, Fighter Nation, isn't in the best part of town. And it's for kids to go after school to learn to box versus being on the streets. And they need a new air conditioner. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have this debate. We've got Jason, who does Arc Junkies podcast, which is a huge welding podcast. Mm-hmm. He's flying in from Florida. I have 3 debaters on the manual side, 3 debaters on the automation side, and they are going to, quote unquote, duke it out in the ring. And then after that debate, we're going to have some Gulf Coast prospects come in and actually duke it out in the ring. So for me, what I wanted was a little bit of education, mm-hmm. And a little bit of entertainment all in one. Something, let's get it out of a bar. This gym is connected to a church, so there won't be alcohol. There will be dinner. It's something you can bring your kids to. And actually, the kids from the gym will be the ones escorting everyone to their chair. They'll be the ones serving them the concessions. So I really wanted to involve them as much as possible. And my goal for the end of the night is to raise enough money for those kids to get the air conditioner that they need.
Wow, that is the perfect definition of a hybrid event. And the cool thing is after the debate, if it gets too heated, and the boxing match, if it gets a little bit too rough, just go right over to the church and
pray it out.
Pray it out.
Yes. And the great thing is, we're calling them Tuesday night fights at Termites. So this in October, we're having a welding topic. But my goal is in 22 that we start including some corrosion topics and some coatings topics and really change it up.
I love the concept. When you and I first started talking about it and I started seeing the posting to it, I was like, this is innovative. It's different. It's unique. And I haven't seen it done anywhere. You see sometimes charity events, but this is a little bit above and beyond a charity event. But the cool thing with it is it's going to benefit the gym, and the gym's there for, like you said, for the children. It's a good way for them to, learn, discipline and other skills, and also to have fun at the same time. So great idea. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how those go for you. And hopefully too, maybe I get to participate in some aspect with you guys as well. So
I would love that. And something that we try to do with all of our large events is we try to find some way to make the profits go back to something that's near and dear to our hearts. So we did a fishing tournament in the spring, and a percentage of those profits went back to the NACE Houston section, just because, like I said, I feel like I grew up at NACE, and the Houston section is very near and dear to my heart, and so I wanted to do something to help them. In December, we have an adult welding competition, and so we've got 3 different competitions in one: a plant, a pipeline, and an executive. And we are raising money in that particular competition for the Texas High School Welding Series, which is a welding competition series for high school students.
Excellent. Now back to the with the gym. Sam's asking, what's the cost of the new AC unit? That's kind of good to know.
Good question, Sam. $20,000.
Wow. Okay. So everybody step up and support the Tuesday night fight. It's going to be a good time. And I just love the industry involvement you have with it too, and looking forward to the outcome with that as well. So before we would go into our third and final topic, what I wanted to do is provide a little review of an article related to, and I'll put the links in my stream comments, and then also too on LinkedIn, and then do it on the YouTube channel when the video goes up later today, regarding really the future of the events industry. So if you could hold on just 1 minute. I hope that you're finding value in today's conversation with CaLae from CEM Marketing and Events on the topic of corporate and industry events. I recently read an interesting article from Forbes.com titled, "What's Next for Live Events?" And I recommend that you check out this article after today's stream. The article appeared on Forbes Women by Amy Schuenthal, and it was published on May 11th, 2021. The author interviewed 3 event planners to get their predictions on the future of the events industry. In the article, it focuses on the impact that the 2020 pandemic had on the events industry and the gradual bounce back of events and conferences during 2021. I found the experts' predictions very intriguing, as it's very apparent that we're seeing the beginning of a blending of physical conferences and events with live virtual experiences. The future of events and conferences looks to be very intriguing. So after the stream ends, you'll find the link to this Forbes.com article in the comments section for this LinkedIn live stream, as well in the description on the stream's recording on my YouTube channel. Okay, now back to CaLae to finish our conversation on corporate and industry events. And welcome back. So the final topic that we wanted to cover, 5 tips to make your corporate event a success. And, based on the research that I did, the first recommendation is to make networking the priority. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of networking related to events?
Yeah, so a lot of people will create events and then they will have speeches during those events, or just different contests and things like that. So it takes, when someone's, think about it from 2 attendees' point of view. They finally are connected, and it's someone that they've been wanting to meet for a really long time, and they are just getting into some really good conversation, and then someone gives up and they give a thank you speech, or a speech about, they're a major sponsor and they're giving a speech about their product or something like that. Or they're being interrupted 10 different times because there's, contests and raffles and things like that. So, and don't get me wrong, there's a time and place for all of that, but I think the priority always has to come back to the networking. If you've only got 2 hours, you want to make sure that the majority of that time is spent allowing them to just simply network. And that's included for myself as well. Like, I'm not going to, yes, I'm going to circle the room and make sure everybody's having a good time, but I'm not going to walk up to my sponsor who's talking to someone else and ask them what their experience is like so far. I'm going to call them the next day so that they can maximize the time that we have during the event.
Very good. And the second recommendation or tip is related to a topic we've been kind of focused on a little bit here, related to the hybridness of events and also to conferences, to tie in that audio visual and that live component. But I'm going to bring up a comment from my friend Guillermo from Ecuador. And he's basically saying here that, these virtual events and the hybrid events, they're cost effective, especially for low income regions. They increase the involvement around the world. And then it should be a trend even after the pandemic. And Guillermo, I think that we both agree with you. And I think a lot of the people watching this live stream, and then also too, industry experts do agree that we are definitely seeing that transition happen to hybrid. Anything additional to what, Guillermo mentioned there that you would want to add to that?
So I think that there is definitely a way to do virtual or hybrid in a very cost-effective way. I think that if you're going to do that, you need to make sure that those expectations are clear to your attendees. We did a virtual event, and the audiovisual vendor that was chosen wasn't up to par, and it was a horrible experience for the attendee. And so you really want to vet out your AV company that you're choosing. And that's something that you want to make sure that you are putting a lot of thought into your budget, and that when you are looking at those RFPs, you're not just going with the lowest because it really does make a difference. Because again, you want to make sure that that virtual experience is as close to in person as you can possibly make it. And in order to do that, you have to have an audiovisual company who is on top of their game.
So when we talk about the experience for the attendee, the participant, combining that with, let's say, a live band or live entertainment, how effective or how impactful is that?
I don't really think that it is that impactful. I mean, you don't really I wouldn't want to be sitting here watching you dance and drink, and you know what I mean? Now I will say one of the things that you could do is you could ship some cocktail kits to their house, to the virtual. You could include that in your budget to where they're able to have a drink with you. And then maybe you set it up where there's different iPads and things around the room where they could basically interact with the people that are in the room. Mm-hmm. But so something like that, a big, large screen, something like that, I think would be beneficial.
How about if you were to incorporate live entertainment? So, for example, you have an industry event and you have a band playing, or you have some entertainer. How beneficial can that be?
Oh, I think that's a ton of fun. And I think it's a huge wow factor, and people love it. I mean, at a certain time of night, people want to dance and cut up and have a good time. And so give them the outlet to do that. Absolutely.
When it comes to, event, you want to have a thoroughly, let's say, planned out event. And what about contingency backups? Mm-hmm. What do you have contingency backups that you do just in case something were to go haywire before the launch of the live event or the event?
Well, first thing I'll always say is something's always going to go wrong. That's just the way that it is. And so your job as what I call front of the house staff, if you are someone that's out in the front of and on the front lines, greeting people or mingling with people, your guests, whatever's going on back of the house, you never let them know that, right? They paid a certain amount or they made a certain amount of effort to get there. So what all they care about and all they need to worry about is the experience that they're having, not you as a planner and the turmoil that's going on in the back. The second thing I'll say is there's always a plan B. There's always a way to figure it out. You just have to calm down, meet with your management team, and figure out the next step forwards. I will say there were so many things when I was working at NACE that happened behind the scenes that the CEO never knew about. And that's what I wanted. That's what I wanted. You know what I mean? Just to make him look really good. And so how we handle back of the house, that's our business. And we'll make sure that it, looks appropriate and looks that everyone has a really good time. And then I would always tell him after the fact what was going down. Yeah,
I got experience with that too. So, when it comes to the marketing and then also social media postings and things like that, that's something that you and CEM marketing events, you're dialed into that really well. How much effort should be paid into making sure that the marketing is a certain way in the social media, let's say broadcasting or announcing, how much should you put into that?
We put a lot of thought into that. For just going back to the boxing, it's important to us that is something that you see at least once a week or, in the crunch time. We're 3 weeks out from that event. So we want to make sure that it's basically in your face as much as possible. We also want to showcase exactly why we're doing that event, what it's for. And so for us, it takes a lot of thought and care to how we build the graphics for it, and then the verbiage and stuff that we're putting behind it.
Very good, very good.
And we look at the interactions too about, what's getting good traction, what's not, and so that we can change and pivot accordingly.
Okay, very good, very good. And then the last tip or recommendation is, asking for feedback and survey attendees. And, to go back when I was talking about working for the National Roofing Company, ran that first hosted buyers. And I remember when, we were doing the debrief and everything, and we're going through everything, the first thing we covered was the survey that I had conducted with the customers, and their experience was, again, how did you view the hosted? Did you see value in it? And we went through it. All of them it was glowing. So, to your point, a lot of times you don't want the executive or you want the owner of a company to know all the magic that goes behind the scenes. Right. And a lot of times things don't work out, like for me with the audio visual equipment, but then you save yourself. You know what I mean? You have that maybe a contingency backup, or you get lucky like I got lucky. How important for you and for your clients is the feedback and surveys done?
It's extremely important. And I like to ask, when I like to ask both on the phone and then if it's appropriate when we're, leaving an event or something like that, when we're on site, to find out what people thought of the event. It's important to me that they're meeting the right people. If they're not, then I need to, take a break from doing this, because I'm not here to just create a party. I'm here to create meaningful connections. And if you're not getting that out of my events, then I need to make a change. And so I always greatly appreciate it when someone emails me or tells me in person, hey, have you thought about doing it this way? Or I went to this event and this is how they did it, and I found it really beneficial. I had one person recently come up to me and at our Charlotte happy hour and gave me some feedback. And then I saw him again at FabTech, and he said, I didn't think that you would ever talk to me again, because I, told you that, you need to keep doing the one in Charlotte. And I, gave you the rundown of what needs to be done. And I said, are you kidding? Like, that's golden material right there. I can't thank you enough. In fact, let me go buy you a drink for that. Like, that's incredible. And so, yeah, if we have a quote in the conference world. It's called, you're only as good as your last show. And you're only as good as your last show based on what your attendee sponsors and exhibits tell you are. So it's very, very important.
Yeah, and that quote's also used in the sales side when you're only as good as your last sale. So
really?
it seems to apply to a lot of different industries.
Yeah.
Are there any, the 5 tips that recommendations I threw out there, is there any tip that I did not mention that you would like to add to that list?
So one thing I've noticed quite a bit is people will, we need to do this event. We can do this event in a month from now or 6 weeks from now. And so they think that they can just throw it together, execute it, and then they seem to wonder why they didn't get the turnout that they wanted or the right kind of people that they wanted. And so what I'll say is, especially if you're launching a new event, give it time to really market it. A good 6 months of just straight marketing, which means that you've done all of the pre-planning before that, right? And so give yourself as much opportunity to make it as a success as possible. And then again, don't create anything unless you know who your target audience is. As soon as you identify who you're going after, then you can create an event that's for them and for the service providers that are trying to cater to them. That's what I'll say.
Very good. And more great wisdom here from Sam. What a concept. Listen to your customers.
Thanks, Sam.
Sometimes listening, that's the hardest skill to have. So
agreed.
Before
I'll say one more thing, if you don't mind. Don't get stale. Meaning, don't do the same thing year after year. Like I always wanted people to think, I cannot wait to see what they're going to do next time. I want you to really remember that, because the same reception in the same ballroom, it gets really stale, right? Yeah. So, and I know you've got 4 walls and you've got those 4 walls you're trying to do some magic in, but really try to do some magic in those walls and make it extremely different from the previous year.
Yeah, I've been to events where it's been the same thing over and over, and you get to a point where you say, do I really want to go? It's going to be the same outcome, and but to shake it up and to make it very unique and make it new opportunities, obviously that's going to help enhance it, and also bring additional new attendees and contacts that come through. Yep. So, before we close up the stream here, I wanted to announce next week's guest, which is Dr. I. And we're going to be talking about learning beyond the classroom, a new way to future-proof our children. And I'm really looking forward to talking with Dr. I from Classrooms Without Walls. So that'll be next Wednesday at noon Eastern Daylight Time here on LinkedIn. And also, too, for everyone to know, I'm doing this test stream also over to my Twitter as well. Just trying to look to stream to probably some different platforms as I move forward with the series here. Let's see here. Rebecca posted, utilize fresh, innovative ideas, keep an open mind on how to improve. Mm-hmm. Definitely. So in kind of wrapping everything up, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you would want to leave with the viewers?
I do. I just want to talk a little bit about this welding competition that we're doing in December. It's going to be here on the east side of Houston. And going to be basically like a festival, if you will. We're holding it on a Saturday. We're having a hood competition, some demos, and like I mentioned before, there's a plant, a pipeline, and an executive. And so Big Magazine is going to come out and they're going to do a full-page article on all of the winners and all the companies represented. Again, we're doing this, we're raising money for the Texas High School Welding Series. And so even if you are not a welder, come out. We're going to have food and drinks, and come out on a Saturday and support, our local youth with that. So thank you for that.
Excellent. CaLae, thank you so much for this opportunity to have a conversation with you today on a very, very good topic. And also, too, like I said, based on what I've seen, there's a bright future ahead for you, for CEM marketing and events, and also for the events industry. And I also would say the conference industry and trade show industries as well. So,
agreed. Thank you, Jim. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Hey, have a great day.
You too. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. See everybody next week.